I'm Amber, 28 years old, and family retreats at Lake Tahoe have been our tradition for 15 years. After losing my biggest client and downsizing my apartment, I desperately needed this getaway with loved ones. Then came that phone call. Mom's voice was hesitant. "Honey, about the retreat, there won't be enough space for you this year." My stomach dropped as years of being the overlooked middle child crystallized in that moment. What they didn't expect was my response. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If my story resonates with you already, hit that like button and subscribe to see how I transformed family rejection into the most meaningful week of my life. Growing up as the middle child in a family of 5 shaped my entire existence. While my siblings blazed spectacular paths through life, I chose a quieter journey as a freelance graphic designer. My small one-bedroom apartment in Seattle was modest, but comfortable, at least until 3 months ago when I lost my biggest client and had to downsize to an even smaller studio. My older brother Ryan, 32, embodied everything our parents valued. He completed medical school with honors, and now works as an orthopedic surgeon at a prestigious hospital. His Christmas cards feature a picture-perfect family, beautiful wife Hannah, twin boys in matching outfits, and their golden retriever posed in front of their colonial home. Every conversation with my parents somehow circles back to Ryan's latest accomplishment, or how hard Ryan works. Then there's my younger sister Madeline, 26, the family prodigy. While I was struggling to find my artistic voice after college, Madeline was launching her first tech startup. Now she's an executive at a Fortune 500 company, drives a Tesla, and vacations in places I can barely pronounce. Her Instagram documents a life of business-class flights, champagne brunches, and networking events with people whose names appear in national headlines. And somewhere in between these two success stories is me, Amber, the middle child. The one whose art school decision was met with concerned looks rather than celebration. The one whose small design victories never quite measured up to medical breakthroughs or corporate acquisitions. Our annual family retreats began when I was 13. What started as a simple weekend at a cabin evolved into an elaborate week-long event as my siblings' fortunes grew. Initially, these gatherings held some of my happiest memories: board games by the fireplace, hiking trails together, and stargazing from the dock. But as years passed, the subtle comparisons became more pronounced. Conversations centered around Ryan's surgical techniques or Madeline's market strategies, while my contributions to discussions were often interrupted or overlooked entirely. Last year's retreat was particularly difficult. Ryan announced Hannah's 3rd pregnancy, while Madeline revealed her massive promotion. When attention finally turned to me, and I mentioned a small local business that had hired me for their rebrand, my father checked his watch and suggested we start dinner preparations. That small gesture wasn't unusual, but it stung nonetheless. This year carried special significance for me. Beyond losing my major client, my landlord had raised the rent on my previous apartment by 30%, forcing me to break my lease and move to a studio half the size. I'd been picking up small design jobs to make ends meet, but the financial strain was considerable. The family retreat represented not just tradition, but a genuine respite, a chance to temporarily escape my worries, and perhaps even network with some of my parents' friends who might need design work. When my phone rang that Tuesday afternoon and I saw Mom on the caller ID, I answered with genuine enthusiasm. "Hi, sweetie. How are you?" Her voice carried its usual warmth, but something in her tone seemed off. "I'm good. Just finalizing some client work before the retreat. I can't wait to see everyone," I replied while sketching logo concepts. "About that?" Mom paused, and my pencil stilled. "Your father and I wanted to talk to you about the accommodations this year." My stomach tightened. "What about them?" "Well, we've reserved this beautiful property, but there's a slight issue with the bedrooms." Another pause. With Ryan bringing the twins and the new baby, and Madeline bringing her new boyfriend Thomas, there just won't be enough space for everyone. The implication hung silently between us. "You mean there won't be enough space for me?" I clarified, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurt blooming in my chest. "It's not like that, honey. We tried to figure out every possible arrangement, but with all the children needing their own rooms because they're light sleepers, and Thomas being a special guest we want to impress." I heard shuffling on the other end. Then my father's voice replaced my mother's. "Amber, be reasonable. This retreat is important for family networking, and Thomas is a potential investor in Madeline's new project. Ryan's children need proper rest or they become unmanageable. You understand, don't you?" What I understood was that I ranked below everyone else, including someone I'd never even met. "Sure, Dad, I understand perfectly," I managed, ending the call shortly after. That night in my tiny studio, I curled up on my second-hand sofa and let the tears flow freely. The string lights I'd carefully hung to make the small space feel cozier now seemed like a pathetic attempt at creating a home. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge what I'd always suspected. In my family's eyes, I was optional. Morning light filtered through my thin curtains, waking me on the sofa where I'd fallen asleep. My eyes felt swollen, my throat raw. The reality of yesterday's conversation settled over me like a heavy blanket as I mechanically prepared coffee in my kitchenette. I tried rationalizing my parents' decision as I sipped from my chipped mug. Perhaps the vacation property truly was smaller than anticipated. Maybe the children really did need separate rooms for proper sleep. Possibly Thomas was a once-in-a-lifetime business connection for Madeline. But even as I formed these thoughts, memories from throughout my life rose unbidden, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. My 10th birthday party, when my parents invited the entire neighborhood but forgot to order enough cake, leaving me without a slice at my own celebration. "You don't need the sugar anyway, sweetheart," my mother had said, while Ryan enjoyed Seconds, my high school art show, where I'd won first place in the county competition. My parents arrived an hour late, having come directly from Madeline's debate tournament, and left early to take Ryan shopping for his medical school interviews. They never actually saw my winning piece. The conversation when I announced my decision to attend art school instead of pursuing business or medicine. "It's your life to waste," my father had said with a sigh, while my mother added, "At least your brother and sister will be able to support you if this art thing doesn't work out." Each memory stacked upon the next until the weight became undeniable. This wasn't about space at a vacation rental. This was about the space I occupied in my family's priorities. I called Jessica, my best friend since college, and recounted the conversation with my parents. "Am I overreacting?" I asked, desperate for perspective. Jessica's response was measured but firm. "Amber, I've watched this happen for years. You always make excuses for them, but this pattern isn't normal or healthy. They consistently prioritize your siblings over you. But maybe this time there really isn't enough—" "Stop," Jessica interrupted. "Your parents are renting a vacation property. They could choose one with enough room for everyone if they wanted to. This isn't about square footage. It's about how they value you." That afternoon, I had my monthly video session with Dr. Martin, my therapist of 2 years. I hadn't planned to discuss my family situation, but the words tumbled out as soon as our call connected. Dr. Martin listened attentively, then asked the question that would change everything. What would happen if you stopped accepting the leftover space in your family and created your own? I blinked at the screen. What do you mean? Your family has shown you where you stand in their priorities. You can continue hoping they'll change, or you can invest that energy in people and experiences that value you properly. For the remainder of our session, we explored the difference between blood relations and chosen family. Dr. Martin helped me frame my feelings not as self-pity, but as legitimate responses to years of subtle exclusion. After our call ended, I sat at my small desk by the window, watching pedestrians on the street below. 2 paths stretched before me. I could accept my exclusion quietly as I always had, perhaps spending the week working on freelance projects in my silent apartment. Or I could choose something different, something for myself. The second option terrified me. It meant acknowledging that the family dynamic I'd been trying to fix for years might be permanently broken. It meant letting go of the fantasy that, eventually, I'd do something impressive enough to earn equal standing with my siblings. But beneath the fear, something else flickered, a small flame of determination I barely recognized. If there wasn't space for me in my family's retreat, perhaps it was time to create a retreat of my own. That evening, I stood in my shower until the hot water ran cold, letting tears mix with the spray. I mourned the family relationship I'd always wanted but never truly had. I grieved for the middle child who spent decades trying to be seen. And somewhere in that process, I began to release the constant need for my parents' approval. As I dried off and changed into pajamas, my gaze fell on the dusty vision board I'd created in January, then abandoned by March when my career faltered. Among images of design projects and dream clients was a small photo of a beach at sunset, a simple pleasure I hadn't allowed myself in years. An idea began to form, tentative at first, then growing stronger with each passing minute. My parents had made their choice. Now it was time to make mine. The vision board felt almost like a relic from another life as I carefully removed it from behind my dresser. Dust particles danced in the morning sunlight as I propped it against my wall and really looked at it for the first time in months. Among the career goals and inspirational quotes, that beach sunset photo caught my eye again, torn from a travel magazine during more optimistic days. I opened my laptop and began researching affordable coastal destinations within driving distance. After an hour of comparison shopping, I found myself repeatedly returning to listings for a small town called Seagrove on the Oregon coast. Unlike the luxury accommodations my family would be enjoying, these were modest cottages and cabin rentals. But something about their simplicity appealed to me deeply. Next came the financial assessment. I opened my banking app with trepidation. The numbers weren't impressive. My emergency fund had dwindled after the apartment change and slow client months. But there was enough. If I was careful and split costs with others, I could make this work. A small beach cottage with 3 bedrooms caught my attention. The Sandpiper was a weathered blue building with white trim, positioned just a short walk from the shore. At $600 for the week when split between multiple people, it was within my budget. Before I could second-guess myself, I entered my credit card information and booked it. The confirmation email arrived with a soft ping, and I stared, at it in disbelief. I had actually done it. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen myself over the hope of family inclusion. With the accommodation secured, I needed people to share it with. Jessica was my first call. "You did what?" she exclaimed when I told her about the cottage. "I booked a beach house for the exact dates of my family's retreat," I repeated, "and I'm inviting you to come with me." Her enthusiastic acceptance loosened the knot of anxiety in my chest. One person confirmed. My next calls were to Miguel, a fellow graphic designer who'd recently gone through a breakup, and Tara, a college friend whose vacation plans had fallen through when her sister had an unexpected surgery. Both readily agreed to join what Miguel dubbed the Misfit Retreat. Over the next few days, my small studio transformed from a place of dejection to retreat headquarters. I created a shared document with meal planning, activity suggestions, and local attractions. I researched tide charts and sunset times. I found free outdoor concerts scheduled in Seagrove's town square. Shopping for supplies became an act of self-care rather than mere preparation. I selected comfortable bedding for my room in the cottage, choosing colors that made me happy rather than worrying what others would think. I purchased ingredients for simple meals we could cook together. And in a moment of inspiration, I created personalized welcome bags for each friend, small totes, containing locally made chocolates I ordered online, handwritten thank you notes, and tiny watercolor paintings I created of the Oregon coastline. Without really planning to, I began documenting the process on my usually quiet Instagram account. Nothing dramatic or attention-seeking, just simple photos of preparations with captions about looking forward to beach time with friends. I never mentioned my family's retreat or the rejection that had catalyzed my plans. To my surprise, these posts received more engagement than anything I'd shared in months. Comments expressed excitement for my trip and admiration for the thoughtful touches I was planning. Several followers even shared recommendations for hidden gems in Seagrove. 2 days before departure, while packing my suitcase, doubt crept in. Was I being childish by creating this alternate retreat? Should I have accepted my parents' decision gracefully? Was I overreacting to what might have been a legitimate space constraint? My phone chimed with a notification from the family group chat. My mother had shared photos of their arrival at Lake Tahoe, exterior shots of a massive lakefront property that appeared to have at least 6 bedrooms based on the window configuration. My father stood proudly in front of a 3-car garage while my siblings and their entourage posed on a sprawling deck. The space excuse dissolved completely in that moment. There had been room for me. I simply hadn't been important enough to include. Rather than responding to the photos, I silently placed my phone face down and continued packing with renewed purpose. The 4-hour drive to Seagrove loomed ahead, and I planned an early departure to avoid traffic. That night, I barely slept. Excitement mingled with anxiety as I questioned whether I could pull off this last-minute retreat. What if the cottage was disappointing? What if my friends secretly resented being my backup plan? What if we ran out of things to talk about? By dawn, I was already loading my small Honda with carefully packed supplies. As I pulled away from my apartment building, the family group chat chimed again with breakfast photos from Lake Tahoe. I turned my phone to silent and pointed my car toward the coast, uncertain whether I was driving toward healing or merely running from pain. The coastal highway curved alongside dramatic cliffs as I approached Seagrove. Salt-laden air filtered through my partly opened window, and the afternoon sun glinted off the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly to my left. After 4 hours of driving, with only my thoughts and carefully curated playlists for company, the first glimpse of the sandpiper brought unexpected tears to my eyes. The cottage wasn't impressive by conventional standards. Its blue paint had faded to a gentle weathered, gray in places, and the white trim needed touching up. But something about its imperfect charm immediately felt like a refuge. A wooden sign with hand-painted sandpipers swung gently from the small covered porch, and potted geraniums flanked the entrance steps. I parked in the small gravel driveway and sat for a moment, collecting myself before unloading. This modest building represented the first time I'd chosen my own happiness over family approval. The significance wasn't lost on me. The property manager, an older woman named Elaine with wind-tousled gray hair, greeted me with a genuine warmth I hadn't expected. She walked me through the cottage, pointing out quirky features like the shell-embedded bathroom countertop and the collection of board games stored in an antique sea chest. Before leaving, she pressed a handwritten guide to local hidden spots into my hands. "You look like someone who appreciates the quiet places," she said with a knowing smile. I had just finished arranging welcome bags on my friends' beds when Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. She burst through the door moments later, her characteristic energy filling the small living room. "This is absolutely perfect!" she exclaimed, spinning around to take in the driftwood coffee table and the large windows overlooking a garden path that led toward the ocean. "So much better than being stuck with your family drama." Miguel arrived next, his normally reserved demeanor softening as he explored the cottage. "I needed this more than I realized," he admitted, setting his bag down in the smallest bedroom. Without complaint. Tara was the last to arrive, bringing homemade cookies and 3 bottles of wine. "Breakup treats," she explained with a wink toward Miguel. "They work for family disappointments too." That first evening, we gathered on the back deck, The cottage wasn't directly oceanfront, but a short pathway through seagrass led to a secluded stretch of beach visible from our perch. We toasted with wine and mismatched glasses I'd found in the kitchen cupboards. "To the misfit retreat," Miguel proposed, raising his glass. "To chosen family," Jessica added. "To creating our own space," I finished, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. As we shared a simple dinner of pasta and salad, I couldn't help comparing this gathering to previous family retreats. There were no subtle competitions or passive-aggressive comments here. Nobody interrupted me when I spoke. My stories received the same attention as everyone else's. The conversation flowed naturally between serious topics and ridiculous jokes, without the strained politeness that characterized my family's interactions. The next morning, I woke to the distant sound of waves and seagulls rather than my nephew's tantrums or my father's business calls. Sunlight streamed through thin white curtains, creating patterns on the patchwork quilt covering my bed. For a few peaceful moments, I simply existed without expectations or comparisons. When I finally ventured to the kitchen, I found Miguel already awake, attempting to operate the ancient coffee maker. What began as a simple breakfast preparation evolved into a comedy of errors as we discovered the toaster only worked if you held the lever down manually, and the refrigerator door needed a specific jiggle to seal properly. By the time Jessica and Tara joined us, Miguel and I were laughing helplessly over burnt toast and coffee grounds scattered across the counter. Instead of the gourmet breakfast I might have planned to impress my family, we cobbled together a mismatched meal of salvaged toast, fruit, and yogurt that somehow tasted better than any elaborate brunch. After breakfast, we made our way to the beach with minimal planning, just towels, sunscreen, and a cooler of drinks. The simplicity felt revolutionary after years of my mother's detailed itineraries and my father's timed activities at family gatherings. I stretched out on my towel, letting the sun warm my skin as Jessica constructed an elaborate sandcastle nearby. Miguel read his novel while occasionally helping Tara collect interesting shells. Hours passed without schedule or purpose, yet I felt more content than I had in months. During a quiet moment while the others swam, Jessica dropped down beside me on the sand. "How are you really doing with the whole family situation?" she asked, wringing water from her hair. I considered deflecting with my usual, "I'm fine," but something about the gentle crash of waves and the distance from my normal life encouraged honesty. "It hurts," I admitted, "but being here is helping me see that their rejection says more about them than about me. I've spent so many years trying to earn equal space in their lives, and I'm starting to wonder if that energy could be better spent elsewhere." Jessica nodded. "You know what I see. I see someone who took a painful situation and transformed it into something beautiful, not just for herself, but for others. That's a rare gift, Amber." That afternoon, we wandered into town without specific plans and stumbled upon a small local arts festival. Colorful booths lined the main street, selling everything from handmade jewelry to driftwood sculptures. A small stage featured acoustic musicians, and the scent of kettle corn and grilled seafood filled the air. What struck me most was how warmly locals greeted us. Unlike the careful social positioning at my parents' retreats, these interactions carried no agenda. When we mentioned staying at the Sandpiper, several people shared their own stories about the cottage or recommended their favorite nearby coves and tidal pools. A gray-haired man selling wooden wind chimes insisted we try samples from his wife's jam stand across the way. "First-timers to Seagrove get the special treatment," he winked, wrapping a small chime carved with sandpipers as a gift. Throughout the day, I found myself checking my phone less frequently. The family group chat continued to fill with photos. My parents with local celebrities at a private dinner, Ryan's twins on a professional fishing charter, Madeline and Thomas wine, tasting at an exclusive vineyard. Images curated to display not just enjoyment, but status. As the sun began to set, we gathered driftwood for a small beach fire in one of the designated pits. Wrapped in blankets against the evening chill, we roasted marshmallows and shared stories that went deeper than surface pleasantries. Miguel spoke about his recent breakup and his fears about starting over at 34. Tara described her complicated relationship with her sister and the guilt she felt about secretly being relieved their vacation was canceled. Jessica admitted her growing dissatisfaction with her corporate job and her dream of opening a small bookstore. When my turn came, I surprised myself by sharing not just the recent family rejection, but the lifetime of small exclusions that preceded it. Speaking these truths aloud under the vast starry sky somehow diminished their power over me. As embers from our fire glowed orange against the darkened beach, I realized I was genuinely smiling. Not the careful smile I maintained during family functions, but an expression of authentic joy. Whatever happened with my family moving forward, this moment was real and entirely mine. On Wednesday morning, halfway through our retreat, my phone rang while I was sketching the view from our cottage deck. Madeline's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach tightened. I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided to answer. "Hey, Maddie, how's Tahoe?" I asked, working to keep my tone light. "Absolutely amazing," she gushed. "The house is insane. Mom and Dad really outdid themselves this year. Thomas is super impressed." "That's great," I managed. "Everyone having fun?" "Oh, totally. The usual stuff. Dad's making everyone get up at dawn for fishing. Mom's orchestrating fancy dinners. Ryan's kids are being demons, but what else is new?" She laughed. "Thomas and I have the East Wing mostly to ourselves, which is perfect." "East Wing?" I repeated, the pencil stilling in my hand. "Yeah, this place is massive. 6 bedrooms in. The main house, plus a guest apartment over the garage. Speaking of which, I meant to tell you, I'm actually staying in your usual room. Hope you don't mind, but it has the best bathroom, and I wanted Thomas to have the full experience." The casual revelation struck like a physical blow. Not only was there plenty of space, but my sister was literally occupying the room that should have been mine. "So there's a guest apartment?" I asked carefully. "Oh yeah, super cute too. Dad's using it as his office during the day, but it's sitting empty otherwise." Her voice lowered conspiratorially. "Between us, I think they just didn't want to deal with your financial situation this year. Mom mentioned something about you not being able to chip in for activities like everyone else." After ending the call with a flimsy excuse about poor reception, I sat motionless on the deck, my sketchbook forgotten. The pretense of insufficient space had completely collapsed, revealing the harder truth. I had been excluded simply because I was deemed less valuable than everyone else. Later that afternoon, the family group chat buzzed with a new photo album. My mother had uploaded pictures of their rented mansion, a sprawling modern structure with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Tahoe. Additional photos showcased multiple living areas, a professional kitchen, and the infamous East Wing, where my sister and her boyfriend were staying. The guest apartment Madeline had mentioned appeared in several shots. A charming space with a kitchenette and private deck that could easily have accommodated me. My father had set up his laptop on a desk there, but the fold-out couch remained untouched. More photos followed throughout the day. Ryan instructing his sons on the private tennis court, my parents hosting what appeared to be local business associates for cocktails, Madeline and Thomas posing beside a rented yacht. My brother added his own messages. "Just booked the family for private helicopter tours tomorrow." Followed by, "Dad says we're all doing the premium wine tasting experience on Friday. $500 per person, but apparently worth every penny." Throughout the steady stream of updates, my parents' communication to me remained minimal. A single, "Hope you're having a good week" text from my mother without any questions about what I was actually doing. As I scrolled through these glimpses of the retreat I'd been told I couldn't attend, the familiar hurt returned. But this time, it felt different. Rather than the confused pain of wondering what I'd done wrong, I felt a clear-eyed sadness at recognizing the truth of my position in the family. The evidence was undeniable, documented in their own photos and words. Jessica found me sitting alone at the edge of the deck, phone still in hand. "Family stuff?" she asked, settling beside me. I nodded and wordlessly showed her the photos and messages. "Well, that's remarkably shitty of them," she said after reviewing the evidence. Her straightforward acknowledgement of the situation without attempts to sugarcoat it was exactly what I needed. "The worst part is that I'm not even surprised," I admitted. "Just disappointed in myself for still hoping it might be different." "That hope isn't a character flaw, Amber. It's actually one of your best qualities." Jessica squeezed my hand. "But maybe it's time to direct that hope toward people and relationships that actually deserve it." Later that evening, I found myself in deep conversation with Tara, who revealed her own complicated family history. "My parents always positioned my sister as the fragile one who needed extra support," she shared as we walked along the shoreline. "Every family event revolved around not upsetting her. Every achievement of mine was downplayed to avoid making her feel bad. It took me until my 30s to realize that arrangement was hurting both of us." "How did you handle it?" I asked. "I stopped expecting them to change and started building a life that didn't revolve around their approval," she said simply. "It was lonely at first, but eventually liberating." Her words resonated deeply, echoing what my therapist had been suggesting. For months. That night, our group unanimously decided to put our phones away in a technology basket that Elaine, the property manager, had placed in the living room. The relief was immediate. No more comparisons, no more evidence of my deliberate exclusion. Instead of checking social media before bed, we impulsively decided to take a midnight swim. Light rainfall had begun, creating gentle ripples across the ocean surface. Under normal circumstances, I would have considered such an activity too spontaneous, too potentially uncomfortable. But surrounded by people who accepted me completely, I found myself running into the cool water with abandoned laughter. Floating on my back in the shallow waves, rain falling softly on my face, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity. Family was not merely a function of DNA, but of how people treated each other. The 3 people splashing nearby had shown me more genuine care in 4 days than my biological family had in years. The next morning, I discovered a local art gallery while wandering through town alone. The owner, an artist named Lenora with silver-streaked black hair and paint-splattered overalls, noticed my sketchbook tucked under my arm. "Are you an artist?" she asked warmly. "A graphic designer," I replied with my usual self-deprecating smile. "I just sketch for fun." "May I?" she asked, gesturing to my book. Reluctantly, I handed over the sketchbook I'd been filling throughout our retreat. Ocean views, detailed shells, portraits of my friends lost in various activities. Lenora turned the pages slowly, nodding occasionally. "This isn't just for fun work," she said finally. "This shows real talent and a unique perspective. Would you consider showing a few pieces in our local artists' showcase next month?" My immediate instinct was to decline, to explain that my work wasn't good enough, that I wasn't a real artist. But standing in this small coastal gallery, 3,000 miles from my family's judgment, I found myself nodding instead. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. "I'd like that very much." As I walked back to the cottage, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. The space I occupied in the world no longer depended on my family's willingness to make room for me. I could create my own space, in art, in friendship, in life, without waiting for their permission or approval. Thursday afternoon brought unexpected turbulence to our peaceful retreat. I was helping Miguel select shells for a mobile he was creating when my phone rang with my parents' number. Having broken our technology fast to check the weather forecast, I was caught off guard by the call. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Amber, honey, How are you doing? My mother's voice carried the slightly overcompensating cheerfulness she used when feeling guilty. I'm doing really well, actually, I replied truthfully. You're not too lonely in that apartment all by yourself. Dad and I were worried about you being alone all week. The assumption that I'd be sitting alone in my apartment because they hadn't included me was so perfectly emblematic of our relationship that I almost laughed. I'm not in my apartment, Mom. I'm at the Oregon coast with friends. A pause. The coast? What friends? The genuine surprise in her voice stung. The idea that I might have my own social circle apart from family appeared never to have occurred to her. Jessica, Miguel, and Tara. We rented a cottage in Seagrove for the week. Oh, another pause. Well, that's wonderful, sweetheart. I had no idea you were planning a trip. It was somewhat last minute, I said, carefully neutral. Is it nice where you are? She asked, audibly struggling to recalibrate the conversation. It's beautiful, small, peaceful, right near the beach. We've been swimming, hiking, attending a local arts festival. I'm actually showing some of my sketches in a gallery next month. The line went quiet for several seconds. That sounds lovely, my mother finally said, her tone unreadable. Listen, sweetheart, Dad and I have been talking, and we feel terrible about the accommodation situation. We think we could make some arrangements if you wanted to join us for the last few days. Ryan's twins are leaving early for a soccer camp, so their room will be free. The offer hung between us, ostensibly generous but revealing so much about their priorities. I would be welcome only after my brother's children departed, slotted into their vacated space as an afterthought. 6 days ago, I might have accepted gratefully, eager for any inclusion in the family circle. Now, looking out at the peaceful ocean and back at the cottage where my friends were preparing dinner together, the offer held no appeal. Thanks, Mom, but I'm going to stay here. We've already planned the rest of our week, and I'm really enjoying myself. Oh. Her surprise was palpable. Are you sure? Your father can send money for a change fee on your return ticket if that's a concern. It's not about money. I genuinely want to stay here. I heard shuffling, then my father's voice replaced my mother's. Amber, don't be difficult, he said without preamble. Your mother is trying to include you, and you're being stubborn. This retreat is important for family bonding. Something about his authoritative tone, the same voice he'd used my entire life to end discussions and enforce decisions, sparked a calm clarity within me. Dad, I wasn't excluded from family bonding because of space constraints. I was excluded because I was deemed less important than everyone else. Madeline told me about the guest apartment, and I've seen all the photos of the house. Now wait just a minute. No, Dad. For once, please, just listen. My voice remained steady, surprising even myself. All my life, I've accepted being the least important member of this family. I've watched you prioritize Ryan and Madeline's needs, accomplishments, and happiness above mine consistently. I've made excuses for it, blamed myself for not being successful enough to deserve equal treatment, and worked desperately to earn approval that never came. My father started to interrupt, but I continued, years of unspoken truths finally finding voice. When you told me there wasn't space for me at this retreat, it hurt. But it also forced me to see clearly what I've been trying to ignore for years. I'm an option to you, not a priority. And while I can't change how you value me, I can change how I respond to it. That's completely unfair, my father protested. We've always supported you. You've supported the version of me you wish I was, the one who would follow Ryan into medicine or Madeline into business. You've tolerated, but never embraced who I actually am. My mother's voice returned, tearful now. Amber, we love you just as much as your siblings. I believe you love me, Mom, but you don't respect me or prioritize me equally, and that's an important distinction. So you're punishing us by refusing to join the retreat? My father asked. anger edging his voice. No, Dad. I'm choosing happiness and self-respect over continued disappointment. That's not punishment, it's growth. The conversation continued for several more minutes, my mother alternating between tears and placating words, my father between defensiveness and attempts at authority. But for the first time in my life, I held my ground without rage or tears, simply stating my truth calmly and clearly. When I finally ended the call, I found my friends gathered on the deck, having given me privacy but remaining nearby for support. Without a word, Jessica opened her arms, and I stepped into her embrace. I'm so proud of you, she whispered as I finally allowed tears to fall. But these weren't tears of rejection or self-pity. They were tears of release, of setting down a burden I'd carried for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight without its weight. Miguel awkwardly patted my shoulder. That sounded intense, but you handled it like a champion. Tara nodded agreement. Total boss move. Their validation meant more than they could know, but the strongest affirmation came from within. For the first time, I had advocated for myself without apologizing for my feelings or accepting blame that wasn't mine. The emotional release transformed into unexpected celebration. Tara connected her phone to the cottage's ancient speakers, and suddenly we were dancing around the living room to upbeat music, movement expressing what words couldn't fully capture. The impromptu dance party evolved into a beach bonfire, then stargazing from blankets spread on the sand. As Thursday night stretched into early Friday morning, we made a collective decision to extend our stay by 2 days, long enough to watch the local weekend farmers market Elaine had recommended. The family retreat would be ending that Sunday, but our alternative gathering would continue, following our own timeline rather than one dictated by others' expectations. Lying in bed that night, I realized the confrontation with my parents had changed something fundamental within me. The constant ache of seeking approval had quieted, replaced by a tentative but growing sense of self-validation. Whether my family eventually recognized my worth or not, I was beginning to recognize it myself, and that, I was learning, made all the difference. Our final full day at the Sandpiper dawned with unusual clarity for the Oregon coast. Typically shrouded in morning mist, the beach stretched visible from our cottage windows, golden sand meeting Pacific blue under cloudless skies. I woke earlier than usual and found myself drawn to the small back deck. Following an impulse, I rolled out the yoga mat I'd packed but hadn't used all week. As sunlight warmed my skin, I moved through simple poses I remembered from a community class I'd taken. Years ago, my practice wasn't impressive or technically correct, but something about stretching toward the sky with the ocean breeze against my face unlocked a profound sense of peace. Not happiness, exactly. That emotion felt too simple for the complex, healing occurring within me. Rather, I experienced a quiet certainty that regardless of my family's behavior, I would be okay. After breakfast, our group took a final beach walk together. While the others raced ahead to explore a tidal pool, I lingered behind, collecting shells that caught my attention. Not the perfect specimens tourists typically gather, but the beautifully imperfect ones with interesting cracks or unusual colorations. Each shell I selected seemed to represent something important. The small sand dollar with a hole worn through its center symbolized the painful space created by my family's rejection. The spiral shell with its gradual outward growth mirrored my expanding sense of self. The broken conch, whose jagged edges had been smoothed by years of tides, reminded me that healing doesn't erase damage, but transforms it into something new. That afternoon, we gathered in the cottage living room for what Miguel called our closing circle, a tradition from his summer camp days. We arranged cushions on the floor, and each person took turns sharing their takeaway from our impromptu retreat. I came here broken-hearted over my relationship ending, Miguel said when his turn arrived. But being around people who value authenticity over appearance has helped me see that relationship wasn't serving either of us. Sometimes what looks like rejection is actually redirection. Tara spoke about finding courage to have difficult conversations with her sister. Watching Amber stand up to her family has inspired me to stop enabling unhealthy patterns in my own. Jessica, typically quick with jokes, grew serious. This week reminded me that we create family through choices, not just birth. The people who truly see and celebrate you are your real family, regardless of DNA. When my turn came, I held my collection of shells in my palm. I've spent my life trying to earn a place in my biological family, believing that their consistent overlooking of me was somehow my fault, that if I achieved enough or became enough, they would finally make space for me at the table. I selected the broken conch with its smooth edges. But this week has shown me that while I can't control how others value me, I can decide how I value myself. I can build connections with people who appreciate me exactly as I am. I can create my own space rather than begging for scraps of someone else's. As our circle concluded, we made plans that would extend beyond this week. A monthly dinner rotation hosted at each of our homes, a shared digital photo album, even tentative discussions about making similar retreats an annual tradition. The return journey the next day carried none of the anxiety or hurt that had accompanied my drive to the coast. Jessica and I caravanned part of the way, stopping at a roadside stand for fresh berries and laughing over the week's memorable moments through open car windows at rest stops. When I finally unlocked my studio apartment door, the space that had felt so confining before now seemed different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I arranged my collected shells on my windowsill and hung the driftwood wind chime Miguel had crafted for me. Within days of returning, I began transforming my beach materials into an art piece, a mixed media creation incorporating shells, sand, dried seaweed, and sketches from our retreat. The finished work captured not just the physical landscape, but the emotional journey of that pivotal week. 2 weeks after returning, I met my parents for dinner, my first time seeing them since the retreat confrontation. The conversation was initially strained, with careful navigation around sensitive topics. But beneath the surface politeness, subtle shifts were occurring. My father, unaccustomed to being challenged, watched me with newfound attention when I spoke. My mother asked genuine questions about my art gallery opportunity rather than immediately steering the conversation toward my siblings' achievements. "We've been thinking about what you said," my mother admitted over dessert. "We never intended to make you feel less important." "I believe that," I replied honestly. "But intention and impact are different things." This dinner marked the beginning of a gradual recalibration in our relationship. I maintained clear boundaries, declining invitations that felt like afterthoughts, calmly pointing out when conversation patterns reverted to old hierarchies, no longer minimizing my needs to accommodate everyone else's preferences. The first family gathering after the retreat revealed another significant change. When I mentioned the gallery showcase of my sketches, my brother Ryan actually asked to see photos of my work. My sister Madeline, perhaps recognizing how her casual revelation about my room had affected me, made visible efforts to include me in conversations. These changes weren't dramatic transformations. My parents still occasionally slipped into old patterns, and family dynamics established over decades wouldn't dissolve in weeks or months. But my response to these patterns had fundamentally changed. I no longer measured my worth through their recognition, no longer desperately sought approval that had always been conditionally offered. The connection with Lenora's gallery proved unexpectedly significant. My sketch exhibition received positive response from the local art community, leading to a small but steady stream of commission requests. 6 months after our retreat, I was supplementing my graphic design work with portrait and landscape commissions that allowed authentic artistic expression beyond client parameters. 1 year after being told there wasn't space for me at the family retreat, I hosted the first annual Chosen Family Gathering at a rented lakeside cabin large enough for everyone who wished to attend. The guest list included Jessica, Miguel, and Tara, along with other friends who needed connection during a typically family-oriented holiday weekend. Unlike my parents' status-focused retreats, our gatherings centered on creativity, authenticity, and genuine connection. We cooked meals together rather than hiring caterers. We played ridiculous board games instead of networking. We shared vulnerabilities rather than achievements. And in that freely given space, surrounded by people who chose to be together rather than obligated by blood, I found the belonging I'd sought my entire life. True family, I discovered, isn't about who makes room for you when it's convenient. It's about who makes you a priority even when it's challenging. It's about creating spaces where everyone belongs not because of what they achieve or contribute, but simply because of who they are. If you've ever felt overlooked or excluded by those who should value you most, know that you're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Sometimes the most healing path forward isn't fighting for space where you're not wanted, but creating new spaces filled with people who genuinely appreciate you. Have you ever had to create your own space when others wouldn't make room for you? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more authentic stories like this one. And remember, the family that matters most is the one that makes you feel like you belong, whether connected by blood or by choice. Thank you for being part of my chosen family of listeners. I'm grateful for each of you who made space for my story today.